Hey, all you beautiful Ethicuties and the 40% of you who have still not subscribed to the Ethicsverse. Welcome to the coolest place to be every Thursday at noon Eastern. If you think fixing our workplace can fix our world, you got to subscribe to the you got to subscribe to the Ethicsverse because you get all the slides, you get all the follow-ups, and you get all those free CEUs. So hit that on the console and let's dive in. We have some couple of quick announcements. You know, I say this every week and I'm going to keep pushing it until we're all smarter. There's so much great thought leadership coming out. So hit this QR code and get a book. See what's in the library. Pick a podcast. Start following it. The one and only Voice of Compliance is on here today, along with the one and only Karen Moore. So these guys are a source of so much wisdom, so much knowledge and information. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get a nice emoji explosion to get going. We're only at 300. What's happening here? Let me share a little video with you right now real quick and see what you think about this.
In a lot of these scandals that seem to be more hardware problems, like the Dieselgate, like the Boeing crashes, it's actually lines of code. It's people who are doing something immaterial to counterbalance a material problem. So Volkswagen and Boeing, they both had hardware problems. The new Boeing 737 MAX had aerodynamic problems because of the new engines. Volkswagen could not build this filter technology. So instead of solving the problem on the hardware level, they found a software solution. And software is more abstract. So whenever you have layers of abstractness between what you do and the consequences, I would assume it makes it much easier to morally disengage, to not feel anything, because you're just coding. You're just doing the little line of codes for a function of a diesel filter, and you don't feel anything about it. There's always layers of abstractness that make it easier for people to commit fraud or bribe or even harass.
Okay, well, if you could sort through that, I guess the video sound was layered there, but I guarantee you guys that was a really good clip from our latest episode of the Ethics Expert. Sorry about that. With Guido Palazzo. He just wrote a really cool book. So check out that latest episode and give it a like. You know, you can do a lot to help our show if you like the show by sharing on LinkedIn, doing a like on the Ethics Experts, and a subscribe as well. We're going to be giving away 5 copies of this book that Hema and Ashley recently wrote. I can't recommend this book enough. It's called The Art of Ideation for Culture Building. It's full of phenomenal tips. So we're going to be giving away 5 of those. And so drop into the chat your questions, your comments. This is our quarterly session where we're talking about the hottest topics in ethics and compliance. So drop your responses in the chat. Let's get that chat going. And your best questions, which we'll try to work into the conversation, are going to go ahead and up your chances to win one of these 5 books. As I'm finishing up these announcements, drop your LinkedIn URL in the chat. Your network is your net worth. I'm coming at you live from DC at the SCCE conference. Karen's coming at you live from hot Austin, Texas, for the Women in Compliance and Third-Party Risk Management Conference with Compliance Week. So there's so much stuff going on right now, but drop that LinkedIn URL in the chat and connect with at least one person today because we have this phenomenal, asset, which is our community. And like I say every single week, you get no bonus points for reinventing the wheel. You do get bonus points, though, for diving into AI. There's a great AI conference coming up end of next week. So if you're in the San Francisco area, check this out, Compliance in the Age of AI conference. There's a code, Ethico 50, that'll get you 50% off because I love you. And there's going to be phenomenal sessions. So check out what is on deck. I got a couple of sessions. The one and only Reed Blackman's going to be there. The one and only Andrew McBride is going to be there. So many great thought leadership. Listen, if we run the risk of AI passing us by, and Tom just wrote a really cool book called Upping Your Game, which is all about use cases for leveraging AI. So you can check that out on Amazon. Go to Amazon and search for Tom Fox, and you'll see all the books that he wrote there. And go ahead and grab that book. It's really good. And if I do say so myself, me and Tom got a cool podcast series going based on the book where we're diving into certain chapters of that. So we've shared a couple of clips of that on the Ethicsverse here over the last couple of weeks, but check that out on YouTube. Just search for Upping Your Game, and you're going to see some really great sessions. All right, let me share a little bit about our new risk assessment tool, which people are going crazy for. So what's great about this risk assessment tool is that it's super flexible and it allows you to create templates for individual risks or for your enterprise risks, really flexible form builder. We, of course, have a whole library of off-the-shelf risk assessments that you can leverage immediately or you can alter for your specific business needs. So again, our job is to get to a crowdsourcing of risk intelligence and making sure that we have an effective, we'll be talking about this more in the conversation today, but that we have a proactive, not a reactive program, and that we're directing our efforts in an effective way. So risk assessments ongoing or ad hoc risk assessments can do a lot to help validate our efforts and make sure that we are spending our limited time and our limited resources on the things that are going to move the needle the most. So if you're interested in checking out the risk assessment tool, I'd encourage you to do that. And I also want to share this. We just got this back from G2. If you're not checking G2 when you're looking for a new tool or a new partner, as we step into this new chapter where the next 10 years can be a lot different than the last 10 years, where we're remembering that what got us here is not going to get us there. Check out G2. It's full of quotes and reviews from verified users. This is not a pay-to-play site, which is great. It can give you some real objective information about what it might be like when you kind of change saddles to a new horse. And look at these awards that Ethico won. Momentum leader, grid leader, high performer, easiest to do business with. You know, I'm toxically flexible. So easiest to do business with, easiest setup, best support. There's nothing worse than calling the support line and hearing a message that says, check out the knowledge base, being able to pick up the phone and make sure that your tools are working for you to create those points of leverage is really what the name of the game is. So this Promised Land promotion, it's coming to an end at the end of this month. We rolled this out over Q1 and Q2, where we're giving up to a year free and 15% off of what your current bill is. This promotion is coming to an end. So if you want to book a demo and just see what's out there, if you have something, if you have a contract that's expiring in the next year, or if you're getting kicked off of your disclosure platform, which some of our largest competitors are shutting down their disclosure platform at the end of the year, and you want something that's integrated into a single platform, give us a look. If you can go ahead and book that demo by the end of the month, then you'll still be open for this Promised Land promotion. So time to move. But look at all those awards. I just can't get over this. I printed these out and I put these on the wall in my office, and I just stare at them all day. Tom Fox, this is book Upping Your Game. We have a white paper that has gone along with that as well. Tom, tell us a little bit about upping your game before we dive in here, because I had dinner with Hema last night, and we were talking about the need, the requirement, frankly, for us to really embrace this technology, because it's such a force multiplier and it allows us to spend more of our time putting our unique gifts to work to really generate more content and generate more guidance for decision making.
Sure, Nick, and thank you. And I've made it to the Ethicsverse, so I have arrived in compliance. It's great to be here. The president's executive order suspending FCPA investigation and enforcement really crystallized many compliance professionals thinking on where do we go next. And Wei Chen offered us a clarion call to it's time to up your game. So I took that clarion call and said, how can we use AI to drive compliance and risk management directly into business operations? So I took most of the hallmarks of an effective compliance program and looked at those issues from the AI perspective at how we could use AI directly into business operations. I found a lot of use cases that had been written up in various business journals. So I was able to bring some examples of these, even if they were 10 years old and we didn't call it AI 10 years ago. It was data analytics. It was advanced data analytics. It was machine learning. It was all the tools we have now, with the caveat that what was a bespoke hundreds of millions of dollars system 10 years ago can now be obtained today for, I don't want to say a song, but much, much cheaper. You can license AI. If you can't afford your own, you can use a variety of tools. Compliance has to evolve. Compliance has to move directly into the business operations. I've always advocated that effective compliance equates to more efficient business controls, equates to greater ROI. Well, now we can show that. And we can show how we can manage risk in a time of extreme volatility. I was just on a webinar literally an hour ago, and one of the panelists said, volatility is just change. It may be extreme change, but it's just change. If you can't manage change, you're not going to be successful as a business person. So how can we take our risk management strategies, embed those directly into business operations and allow our companies to execute literally at the speed of AI. That's the story I told in Upping Your Game.
So check that book out. It's really there's really so many actionable tips, and if you don't know how to kind of embrace this quote unquote terrifying, it's not terrifying, this quote unquote terrifying technology, this is going to be a great way to get you to jump in the pool. All right, with that, we have the one and only Tom Fox, the one and only Karen Moore. I'm Nick Gallo. How's it going? Chief Servant and host of the Ethicsverse. I look spaced out, but we're going to dive in today on the hottest topic. So Tom, I'll go ahead and pass it over to you.
The hottest topic I think that we would talk about today was we finally had some clarity from the Department of Justice on how they are going to move forward with white collar enforcement. That's white collar, obviously broader than the FCPA, but for the compliance professional, we got solid information. And every time the DOJ speaks, they give us information. Well, we had a speech, and we had from Matt Galoti, and then we had papers or memos released, which explain the information given in the speech by Galoti. So we have a new corporate enforcement policy that brings a much bigger and greater carrot for self-disclosure. We have a new policy on monitorships, and we have a new expanded policy on whistleblowers. All of those are going to have huge implications for the compliance professional, but I want to focus on the new corporate enforcement policy, because if you self-disclose, if you remediate, and if you investigate and then you remediate, you're going to get a declination, and that is guaranteed, or what, to the extent the government ever guarantees anything. But it's a huge expansion of the carrot as opposed to the stick. And many of us thought, even after the president's executive order, now may be the time to go back and take a deep dive investigation to look and see if we have any problems, because this administration may reward self-disclosure. Well, absolutely, they will reward self-disclosure. And so all of the things that we have traditionally done in the investigative space are now, I think, even doubly important, or can be even more beneficial for your corporation if you do the basic steps of investigate, remediate, and self-disclose. But it all starts with self-disclosure. Even if you have extenuating circumstances or extraordinary circumstances, or you have senior executive involvement in the criminal action, you can still get up to a 50% discount. So there's big carrots in place. And so now may be the time you want to seriously think about them. I've talked, Nick, to a lot of lawyers in private practice to ask them, does this change the calculus? And of course, they're lawyers, so they say it depends. But make no mistake, the carrot is bigger.
What do you take away from it, Karen?
Yeah, one of the problems at the moment, these past few months, is that every time there's something new that comes out, you approach it with such a kind of negative lens, and you forget that there's some positivity here, and there's a lot of opportunity here, as Tom mentioned. So the corporate enforcement policy revisions, I think, first of all, I gotta love a flow chart. There is a flow chart in there that helps to illustrate whether you're on a path to a declination, whether you're kind of a near miss, or whether you're, kind of, in the weeds in terms of what's going to happen. So, I love the clarity. Like all things, I think what you say and what you do need to match up. So I'm really curious to see the first companies that go through this path, especially to declination, because on what basis is the self-disclosure and the lack of aggravating circumstances going to be evaluated? Is it completely on a self-reporting basis and, oh, thank you so much, and you're good to go? Is there going to be some skepticism? Who's going to be doing that kind of analytics? I guess the near miss category even more so. Like, where do you go from there, given the opportunity for up to a 50% reduction off the lower end of the federal sentencing guidelines, penalties, the kind of non-prosecution agreement. And I think that these things have to be read in conjunction, right? So you end up with this desk full of papers. You've got the corporate enforcement policy revisions and Galeotti's speech. You've got the changes or the continuation of the whistleblower awards pilot program, which is not even a year old. So how is that going to work in conjunction, right? It seems to preserve the idea that if a whistleblower comes up with novel information, but has also reported internally, that the self-disclosure is still going to be preserved from a benefits point of view for the company. I think they still have that 120 days. So you've got to take a look there. That whistleblower also has expanded, I think, quite significantly the scope of the types of things that can be disclosed by a whistleblower. So maybe more incentives there. And then, you know, among others, reading it also in conjunction, and maybe we're going to talk about this a little more, Tom, because I know you've written quite a bit on this, with the memoranda earlier in May on corporate monitors, which really seems to provide both concern and opportunity in terms of this return to a hands-off approach to the application of monitors, kind of a, you know, real return to the pre-2018 positions that Benchkowski implemented, you know, really much more unlikely to impose a monitor. And, you know, the big carrot there from the compliance officer's perspective is that a lot of that is dependent on the assessment that there's going to be a strong compliance program in place and that misconduct is unlikely to occur. So you want to kind of set yourself up nicely there to make sure that you're kind of off the hook on the monitor side. Unfortunately, I'm also kind of a big fan of monitorships in the right situation, so I'm conflicted there.
Tom and Karen, you guys both talked about this, the opportunity that's in this, you know, this expansion of the carrot, so to speak. I think you know, I think we tend to kind of key in on the stick and what is the stick and how big is that stick and how fast and hard will that stick be swung. But they're really trying to, and I think they've been kind of leaning into this and revealing more and more. I mean, the flow chart's phenomenal, but they've been leaning into this more and more over the last couple of updates, that they're really trying to signal the type of behavior they want from us. And there's a lot of overlap between what the regulators want from us as practitioners and what we want from the stakeholders within our organization. If there's an issue, they want, you know, we want to know about it, and we want people to come to us in good faith so that we can extinguish those risks and actually do it right. And I think this change in calculus is very compelling, and having that kind of guarantee, you don't have to, you know, sit in the back, you know, the mahogany tabled room, strategizing on the extent to which you want to disclose that guaranteed declination and the clarity around, you know, not quote unquote getting in trouble and slapped on the wrist. I think should drive a lot more transparency from organizations to these regulatory bodies to really help improve the effectiveness of these programs. I mean, these programs exist for a reason, and I was very encouraged by this, because it made what, you know, we've talked about this a couple of times on the Ethicsverse over the last, you know, several months. The clarity and the transparency around their thought process, I think, should give us a lot more security in interacting with them in a sort of good faith, transparent way.
The proof will be in the pudding there, I think, Nick, to see how it actually works in practice. Also, to make sure that companies aren't reading this as a, you know, no holds barred opportunity to to just act independently of oversight. Any company that is implementing a compliance program on the back of fear of criminal prosecution is kind of starting off on the wrong foot anyway. But I agree, there's opportunity here. I'm really curious to see where it goes. There's been some talk about a renewed focus on individual accountability. There's been a lot of talk about that in the past. We haven't seen a lot of it. So I'm curious to see where that goes as well.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that individual accountability. A lot of companies can get benefits for cooperation. It seems like the DOJ's focus remains on prosecuting individuals responsible for that corporate misconduct. So to your point, they're not like throwing everything out the door. But what thoughts would you have on that, Tom?
Well, in 2015, Lisa Monaco released the Monaco memo, which said, we're going to focus on individual liability under the FCPA. I think either I'm in an echo chamber or I've heard this before. So, but Karen's point is spot on. The proof will be in the pudding. And corporations can garner greater credit by cooperating with the government and giving information on individuals, recalcitrant individuals who violate the FCPA. But we've been hearing about individual prosecutions for 10 years now, and how the DOJ is going to ramp up and really go after those who violated the law. So maybe.
Well, you know me, I believe everything I read. Literally everything I read.
And you read a lot.
There for you. Yeah. So let's jump into this question. If CCOs are going to talk to boards, management, first line teams about why compliance still matters, what should they say, and to what extent can they leverage this DOJ or this new guidance in those communications? Maybe we can start with you, Karen.
Any opportunity you have to use news to talk to the board is helpful. I don't know about the people that are attending here. I've found over the course of compliance roles in 4 different companies that the board is very often preoccupied elsewhere, especially if you're reporting into the audit committee and you've been given your 20 minutes and asked to whittle it down to 5. So I grab any opportunity. Frankly, I'm not really sure how much tremendously new stuff I see here, absent an issue that may be open to self-disclosure at the board level. The only topic I would tee up at the moment is, read into this. Don't read, surface level as a DOJ's backing off. We're good to go. We don't have any kind of oversight here. Because I think that's a misconception. It's going to come back to bite companies that don't, pay attention to the fact that they need to double down now on messaging, on who we are, what our expectations are, how we conduct our business. So not to get the wrong message. I think that's really the main thing to deliver to the board.
That's good. What do you think, Tom?
I think my message would be twofold. Number one, now is the time to invest in AI and compliance so that we can move compliance to not only integrated more directly into business operations, but, and I don't mean to pick on tariffs from a political standpoint, but from a volatility standpoint.
Yep.
We had tariffs. We didn't have tariffs. We may have tariffs. We may not have tariffs. That is literally 72 hours of political discourse. And the volatility that brings to the business is great. Now, you can have volatility in tariffs. You can have volatility in currency. You can have volatility in climate. You can have volatility in energy use. You can have volatility in a wide variety of areas. And the key is, how do you respond to that volatility as a business person? And I think by taking the strategies that we have used as compliance professionals to identify, assess, and manage risk, we can move those strategies to things that are extraordinarily volatile, like what we've seen with tariffs since early April, and at least have a plan, at least be there to give management options to how do we navigate this? Once again, whatever that volatility is. And so one of the reasons I wrote the book was I wanted people to understand, or compliance professionals to understand, that management of risk is what we do every day. And if we can bring those same risk management strategies using the power of and speed of AI, we can give our business leaders more options more quickly so that they can more efficiently navigate business volatility.
Yeah,
I want to clarify. I'm sorry, Nick. I just wanted to clarify that when I said I'm not sure there's that much to talk to the board about here, I'm talking about the corporate enforcement policy changes. So I'd love to on over to AI risk, and we shouldn't be ignoring in the attendee chat, there's quite a robust conversation about the cost of AI from an environmental perspective. So as we're talking about AI, and I think, Tom's got some such terrific advice there, we should also be incorporating that concern and not forgetting it.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. I don't want anyone to lose their mind because we're not talking about that. I think it's one of those things that it was kind of said in the chat. If you're not inhaling it, you're not seeing it. It doesn't seem like so much of a cost from an environmental perspective. But this is one of those hidden environmental costs. And as the cost of compute goes down, by necessity, it's going to require a tremendous, a ton more energy production. And so some of the estimates that I've seen in some of these white papers that have come out about energy production and energy usage over the next 5 years, I mean, it's massive and it's probably wrong because this stuff is advancing so much faster. The proliferation of it, even just the conservative estimates are probably not even close to what it's actually going to be. Before we dive into the AI piece, though, I just wanted to say one thing. Remember that old saying, never let never let a good crisis go to waste. Like, you have to get something from all this stuff. If there's new stuff coming out from DOJ, or there's new guidance coming out, even if it's not that new, it's an opportunity to demonstrate that you're kind of in the know and that you're looking out on behalf of the organization, right? There is a lot of value in information asymmetry. That's how these people are able to sell all these Instagram courses, and, all these courses and all these things that are out there, how to be a millionaire, whatever those are. That is all rooted in information asymmetry. And we as human beings are wired to seek pleasure, or we're wired to seek experiences that enrich us and reward us. And so when we can show up and tie in what some of this new guidance is and how that could intersect with the volatility the business is experiencing, we can show up as a business person in a more compelling way. And Tom said volatility about 15 times. In the finance world, that term is synonymous with risk. So the volatility of your portfolio is a question of the risk of your portfolio. What's the standard deviation of outcomes? As that standard deviation of outcomes increases, well, that's more risk in whatever system we're talking about. So to Tom's point, when there is a lot of volatility, whether it's a new technology or it's new regulation or it's tariffs or it's whatever, we need to be stepping into those conversations as business people, as trusted advisors with a perspective. Tom said this as well. And so, if we're not coming to those conversations with a perspective, and we're not coming to those conversations with a couple of prescriptions on what the business can do, then we're just going to continue to be viewed potentially as that bumper sticker on the car, apart from the business instead of a part of the business. So it's on us to pull our chair up to the table. And there's a lot of things going on right now that we can weave into our conversation and use as catalysts to drive our interaction and our impact with the business to a greater degree. So let's shift over, though, into this energy use thing, and how we should be thinking about it from a risk standpoint, from a compliance standpoint, from a sustainability standpoint. So what would you guys contribute based on that?
Well, let me start with the energy side, and then I think we should be talking about also just the AI risk generally in compliance, because as Tom has laid such an amazing groundwork for incorporating AI into every aspect of your program, there are also risks that need to be managed. I'll just say really shortly on the energy side, because I was talking about ESG and the third-party risk management here in Austin the other day. is that, companies that don't think that they've got a whole bunch of ESG, so like, oh, we're a services company or we're a tech company, we're not like an ESG thing. This increasing use of AI is something you got to roll into your kind of third-party due diligence and into your reporting requirements. Just keeping an eye on what's going on, especially in Europe, even though the CSRD and the CSDDD are being kind of pulled back a little bit. What are your risks there in terms of assessing the energy use, even if you don't think you're on the front line of that risk profile? So just kind of mention that on the energy side.
Yeah, that third-party impact is interesting, and I haven't heard a lot of people talking about it. That's why you are who you are, Karen. You're always at the cutting edge of something. All right, Tom, what about you? What would you add there?
So I live in the great state of Texas, and through the infinite wisdom of the Texas legislature and governor, we are not connected to the national power grid. We have our own power generation and grid in Texas. What that has led to is a large number of outages. If we have a bad winter storm, we lose power. If we have a bad summer storm, we lose power. And we have just grown accustomed to suffer. For a business is, how are you going to operate if your business model is based on power consumption to run your computers, to run AI? I might be able to work with a slide rule, maybe.
An abacus?
I went to state slide rule competition in high school. That was a long time ago.
Did you?
I did.
Wow.
And
dust that baby off,
Yeah. Being a son of an engineer. But the reality is, if you can't get power, you can't run your business. And one of the most prescient things I heard coming out of the pandemic is we've moved from disaster recovery to business continuity to business as usual. It doesn't matter what the event is. The question is, okay, you lost all power. It's Friday. What are you going to do Monday? And so you have to plan out these scenarios, and you have to have backups planned, backup sources of power. We didn't even get to the sustainability part because I knew Karen would have the much better answer for that. But my point around ESG is, who wouldn't want to know what your energy spend is? Because if you don't know what your spend is, you're not going to be able to measure it and make it more efficient. These are just basic business tools. And that's what I saw ESG as, a basic business tool. And so by quantifying those numbers, you not only have a baseline to start with, here's what we're doing, but you also have a starting point to manage that risk going forward. So that to me is going to be the critical part, because at least in Texas, we're going to have outages because we're going to have hurricanes, we're going to have freezes, we're going to have other weather related events that are going to take our system down, or it can just be a hot day and it blows the system up. It doesn't really matter what it is, because Mother Nature is going to decide what she wants to do, and she's going to do it to us. And we're going to have to respond with an out-of-date grid. So how are you going to manage that risk? How are you going to determine what your energy spend is? And how are you going to manage that spend, which is ever increasing a part of your business cost?
And don't let, I think that's spot on. And I would say, don't let the inability or difficulty in quantifying whatever you're talking about to the penny prevent you from discussing this in concept. Again, it's on us to ABC, always be closing, always be selling, always be trying to reframe, always trying to add value to the business, particularly if we're in a situation where we don't have the brand we would like within the organization. Talking about more of these risks that are perhaps outside of the scope of what the person you're talking to assumes is sort of inbounds for you can do a lot to show that you're on the same team, that you're trying to add value and helping to sort of see around the curve. Okay, I want to jump to this other question about whistleblowers. So there's been a lot of discussion about using the False Claims Act and relying on whistleblowers to lead the charge. What does that mean for corporate culture and internal hotlines, and how can compliance and ethics folks leverage that guidance to maybe reinvigorate their program, or what's your reaction to this question? Let's start with you, Karen.
Yeah, so I I have a lot of concerns here. Unlike the corporate enforcement policy, some of the kind of comments and the intended aggressive use of the False Claims Act to pursue what could be a political agenda really does concern me, frankly. So not just from the whistleblower side. So just for people who are attending who may not be as familiar with the False Claims Act. It's an act which creates civil liabilities for entities or individuals that present false claims to the government. It's just like I've fiddled basically my invoices, or in what they're calling now reverse false claim is kind of like undervalued the value of my goods. I picked something else on the harmonized tariff schedule and paid less to the government. So you can go after the company. It's the commercial litigation. Civil fraud section at the DOJ that would go after that with treble damages. It's a big deal. It makes sense. It's kind of a much more robust way of pursuing waste in government than maybe some other things. But there's this other component, which is the independent ability to go after False Claims Act by so-called whistleblowers, right? You can do what they call a qui tam submission on behalf of the government. You get a pretty hefty share of penalties assessed by the government if it's a successful act. And you don't have to actually have any real insider knowledge. I mean, there's a whole business growing up off of these qui tam. They've been up, I think I saw one data point, up 37% recently. So it's kind of I don't know, it's not the honorable whistleblower path that sometimes we think of corporate whistleblowers taking to right wrongs that they view. It's kind of a money-making opportunity. I know, I acknowledge that that's a really cynical view, and there's some really great people, they're called relators, that bring these acts because they feel that the government's being cheated, and they can bring these acts in a way that maybe the government can't. But getting back to the volatility point that Tom made over tariffs, this is something that is now going to be used in two ways that I haven't seen particularly. Not that I'm a in-depth expert on the False Claims Act, although I did work for a company that had a monitor because of False Claims Act issues. So I at least have some roll up your sleeves familiarity with that. But I haven't really seen it that much on the tariff and the customs side and on the DEI side. And those are two areas that we need to keep a pretty close eye on, because I feel like this could be used to advance agendas beyond just protecting the government from false claims. I don't know, Tom, what are you seeing there?
So I think it puts more pressure on internal reporting systems, both in terms of speak up cultures, but also monitoring. And let me just speak to one that I have personal familiarity with now, and that's coffee tariffs. So as you know, Nick, I have my own white labeled coffee, and I buy it from a supplier here in Kerrville, Texas. And so I bought another set from her, and I asked her, how is the coffee tariffs impacting her? And she said it was basically increasing 1 pound of coffee $1. So we went from $12.95 to $13.95. But here was a more interesting thing she said to me. So obviously you can get coffee from a variety of countries, although not in America. We don't have coffee grown in America, but Colombia, Nicaragua, Mexico, you name the country. And of course, the same as African countries. Every country has a different coffee flavor. They have a different strength. They're all unique, and that's part of the beauty and joy of a coffee drinker. Well, what she told me was that Mexico has the lowest coffee tariffs, and big companies had bought out all the coffee in Mexico through the end of the year. So they'd optioned out all of the harvest, and she can't get any Mexican coffee, which is a lighter roast coffee. So she can't get her lighter roast, and she had to source it from another country, which was an increase in price and an increase in tariffs. And then, so the major coffee players bought out the cheapest coffee to start with. So it's driving up her cost, it's driving up my cost. And it's going to, if I ever start to sell it, instead of giving it away, it'll drive up that cost as well. Well, what happens is that resourcing to Mexican coffee, is that illegal in any way? And what do you do if 10% of your coffee came from Mexico 6 months ago, and in 2025, 90% of your coffee comes from Mexico, solely to get out of a higher tariff? Is that going to cause problems? Is product diversion through a third-party country going to get you in trouble? Well, how are you going to determine if you're doing that? If you're a chief compliance officer and you see that 2% of our coffee was sourced in Mexico and 4% is now, is that meaningful? How are you going to even know that unless you have very sophisticated monitoring systems that AI can give you, and they can look at those numbers and say, here's a change, should you investigate it? So I think it's going to put more pressure on ongoing monitoring from a data analytics perspective, as well as the traditional anonymous reporting or hotline or a culture of speak up, because even in the Compliance Week conference back in April, Jane Nordberg told us, I think 80% of all whistleblowers report internally first, even in 2025. So most people are trying to do the right thing and report internally, and they're being turned down or at least not listened to, so that they go to the government. So companies need to utilize the resources they have available to them, both in terms of anonymous or other reporting line, plus you need to ramp up your monitoring to protect yourself.
Yeah, and I would say you also need to ramp up your program, because to your point, this is 80% of the people that end up ultimately reporting externally have tried to report internally first. So there's some kind of wall that they hit, or they, this happens all the time. Somebody says something to their direct manager, and the manager thinks that they handled it, but it's not handled in the way that you would handle it, right? So that individual reporter ends up saying, all right, well then I need to say something to somebody, and they end up stepping out of the organization. And I think, the whole point about this race to disclose, the DOJ has these requirements that, something has to be previously, it can't be previously known to the department. So if something has been disclosed by a whistleblower that you later disclose voluntarily or otherwise, you're not going to get a lot of credit for that. So if they fail, I just think there's so much risk intelligence in the organization. We're really only scratching the surface of it. And to Tom's point, we have to leverage what we have in place. And I think we have to exhibit that high agency to make sure that we're getting as many fish as possible. Karen, you were about to say something before I rudely cut you off.
No, I think I rudely interrupted you, Nick, but I wanted to say a couple of completely unrelated things. One, just to make sure, I had a thought on the customs duties and the tariffs and the chances that you might end up somebody whistleblowing under the False Claims Act, increased use of the False Claims Act here, is that in this kind of geopolitical environment and in this volatile, sanctions, everything, companies are moving pretty quickly to pivot their sourcing. And so even with the best intention and the best kind of import controls programs that they may have, the opportunity that they're going to mislabel a country of origin, they're going to apply the wrong part of the harmonized tariff schedule, they're going to claim that that there's a different valuation, or that there's a free trade application that shouldn't be applied. The chances that you get caught by a realtor and subject to False Claims Act for completely relatively innocent errors, I think is much higher than it used to be. So that whole confidence that whistleblowers are going to report internally and that we can beef up confidence internally in whistleblowers, that kind of hesitance to go to the government, if you're listened to carefully internally, may be a lot more diluted in this False Claims Act environment than under the kind of traditional corporate enforcement policy, which, remember, is kind of the criminal, false claims is civil, where you see something that really disturbs you, say a bribery and corruption, then you bring it up internally, you feel listened to. The barriers to reporting then externally to the DOJ are relatively high. It's like you said, it has to be novel information. It takes a really long time. You're subject to a lot of hell. But you can do both, right? You can report internally, still benefit from reporting externally. The company internally under the corporate enforcement policy it seems like they preserved that opportunity to still get voluntary self-disclosure credit within 120 days, even if the whistleblower reported externally. False Claims Act is like this different animal. And I feel like, and again, I acknowledge I'm maybe being cynical. I feel like there's more venality here, and I feel like there's more opportunity to trigger investigation and action on the basis of what may be just difficulty in managing your import duty and tariff classification management in terms of how quickly you're having to ship supplies and suppliers globally. So,
your cynicism is really part of your charm, though. You're like charmingly cynic. You're charmingly cynical. Okay. So let's kind of talk about this self-disclosure debate. I want to talk a little bit about like, what is the logic that a business might have to like resist self-disclosure, and how could us as compliance executives or compliance professionals argue against that? Like, what do you think some of the reasons are? What's some of the logic behind the resistance, and how can we attack that argument in a compelling way? Let's start with you, Tom.
Sure. Well, number one, and always remember, there's no legal obligation to self-disclose. Period. You can find you have something and not self-disclose. That's not illegal. You cannot find something and not self-disclose, and that's not illegal. Now, it's the something that's illegal. So let's assume you've looked, you've investigated, you found something. Now what are you going to do about it? Well, you can always remediate it so that it's not ongoing or doesn't happen again. Once again, not illegal, and hope, and it's only a hope, that well-known business strategy of Warren Buffett, hope that no one reports to the Department of Justice or the DOJ or SEC doesn't otherwise find out about it, because then you'll have to go through an investigation and you don't have the benefit of self-disclosure. So the benefit is, if we are as certain as we can be, we're going to get a full declination. It can be a powerful tool. Now, Karen has told us at least 3 or 4 times, proof's in the pudding. And she's absolutely right. Till we start seeing a body of evidence that they are actually going to do what they say they are going to do, and companies are getting these declinations for timely or kind of close to timely self-disclosures, you can't say with any certainty that's what they're going to do. But if they're really going to follow through with this, it can be a very powerful argument to clean up anything that may have happened at your organization and get a free pass. If you do what I said at the start of this answer, which is you investigate, you find out something, you remediate, you're not getting a free pass. And that should be part of your consideration. So I think, once again, subject to we actually see this work in practice, this can be a powerful tool to get you out of a problem that you may have had or you may have to worry about if you don't self-disclose.
Yeah, I fully agree there, Tom, and just a few additional thoughts. One is, if you choose not to self-disclose, and you've got to hope that there's no whistleblower, remember that the period of limitations on some of these corporate crimes are long. So the chances that something happens over time increases, over time. So especially if you don't remediate appropriately. So you are kind of running that risk there. The other thing I would say, as a black hat, rose-colored glass person, that I'm always in favor of self-disclosure, because I believe in transparency, and that with goodwill and a collaborative effort with the DOJ, you're going to come up to a resolution that is going to be satisfactory to all parties. This declination path is obviously very appealing. However, I've had very heated arguments and discussions, because don't forget, compliance is only one half of the argument, with general counsels, especially those that have a very strong litigation background, are really averse to doing anything of the kind. So, you really have to look at around 360, the pros and cons there. Once you self-disclose, it's kind of in the public domain. We haven't seen a lot of declination letters published with details, but they do exist. So now you've got public domain information about your bad conduct, which can have knock-on effects. Is one thing. The other thing is there's no double jeopardy for a lot of these criminal activities in the international arena. So you self-disclose if you've got something that involves misconduct in other countries. I think that there are a lot of enforcement bodies and administrative bodies in other countries that are so excited to step in, especially in the bribery and corruption arena, step into the breach and start to be like more of a major player. So you've got to also be a little bit concerned there about whether you're exposing yourself outside the U.S.
That is a phenomenal point. One of many today from you, but that's a good point. It's not as easy as just kind of pushing all in on that disclosure, because there can be those sort of knock-on effects, and that 360 view is pretty important. All right, let's talk about the spookiest thing in the world, AI. AI is so terrifying. Okay, my tongue is firmly implanted in my cheek. Let's talk about some of these AI risks that are brewing. So there was this huge study from KPMG that finds a lot of employees admit to using AI against company policies. Are you shocked? How should compliance work to get AI risk assessments done if you don't have the Ethico tool? Like, who else within the company should they work with, and what questions should they be asking? So I'd like to talk a little bit about sort of philosophy around AI policies and the assumption that, because it's absolutely true, I guarantee that it's happening, people are going to be using AI kind of regardless of what that policy says. So how do you think we should kind of start to get our arms around that? How should they work to get the risk assessments done? And who within the company should we be talking with or collaborating with, around these kinds of questions? Let's start with you, Tom.
Employees are always going to use the most cutting edge currently available tools. And at $20 a month, if you want to go cheap, you can get a ChatGPT subscription. It is absolutely insane to think, well, as you would say, I'm shocked that employees would do that. But it's absolutely insane for a corporation to ban that, because their employees are going to do it. Why? It makes you a better employee. You can do more. You're more productive. I use AI as an editorial assistant and as a research assistant. I don't even touch the analytical capabilities. And so, but I've talked to people who've used them, and they've got really good analysis, or they feel like they've gotten really good financial and analytical analysis using AI. So you have to make those tools available. Then it becomes, how are you going to govern it? So what are you going to put in it? Is that information going to go into the public domain? So you put company data into your public domain. And how are you going to manage both the governance and then the risk of that? Compliance absolutely has to partner with other corporate functions. Obviously, a CISO or a CTO is going to be a prime one, but you have to look at things like HR. But you have to look at things like your CFO. You probably need your COO, and you're going to need a broader management level committee to set whatever policies your company should have on governance. When it gets to the risk, one, you always have to worry about hallucinations. So you're going to have to figure out a way to make sure employees understand that whatever they get is a first draft that may or may not be correct. And if you get a first draft, you have to verify it in some other way, whether it's the old-fashioned way, well, let me just add up the numbers, see if they work or make sense, as opposed to this is a black box that I can't figure out how they got the answer out of. So that's sort of where I would start. But you start by getting kind of the top thinkers in your corporation together and saying, we are going to do this. How do we manage it within the culture of our company?
Okay. How about you, Karen? What would you say?
Yeah, so I read through the KPMG study with increasing alarm, but also no surprise. I think there was a figure bandied about that 73% of the people that they polled, and it was a pretty broad group, are using generative tools on their own, and vast majority of them are using the free public version. So it's not even the company controlled version or
Right.
any kind of thing that's, where they're training on company data. So the large language model is huge. I mean, that hallucination risk. I love the use of the term because I'm a sci-fi fan, as are you, Tom, I think. And there's a classic short story, Do Robots Dream of Electric Sheep? And it just reminds me of that with this hallucination risk, because I think it's huge. We've seen it in the legal environment where lazy lawyers have submitted briefs to the court, which cite fictitious cases. I mean, it's mind-boggling. So if people are lazy, that use of AI can have really disastrous knock-on effects, not just laziness, kind of editing effects, but and the other thing I think is you've got this kind of I think, in fact, somebody quoted you on this, but it's something I thought of too, spell check being the gateway drug, right? We all grew up with using spell check without even thinking about it because it's a pretty harmless tool that helps make our lives easier. And once you do that, it's very easy to use an editing tool. Once you do that, it's easy to use a research tool. These are all really valuable tools that help improve our work life, help make things easier. So 1,000% agree with Tom that you can't just ban it. You ban it and then it really goes underground. You've got to kind of legalize it so that you can get the benefits of it. You can control for it a little bit. You can educate people on where the risk areas are. Making sure that we're not creating privacy risk for the company. We're not sharing confidential information. We're not using false data. We're not exercising copyright. I think this is one of my biggest issues, is that when I'm using AI to help me prepare a report, is that sometimes you've got copyright issues that you're not even aware that you're running afoul of. So bans don't work. You've got to legalize it. You've got to kind of create a mind shift for people so that they're using things appropriately. And then my other big bucket fear there is what I'm calling the stealth AI, which is AI that is being used in your third-party relations that you don't even are aware of in your interactions, that there's an AI component and you're almost inadvertently using artificial intelligence without even understanding how that's working and how you can manage this.
So we have a couple of minutes left, and I want to stay on this topic some more because I think there's just such a mix in our space about, someone at this conference that I'm at literally said AI is so terrifying this morning. I kind of think that's a very dangerous mindset. I think Tom would as well. That's why he wrote the book. That's why we're doing the podcast. That's why we ripped out this white paper. And so, how would we approach a risk assessment in the most effective way? Let me say, what I'd like from you guys are some good questions for let's call it like a bite-sized risk assessment. That's how we're seeing a lot of people use our new risk assessment tool, which I shared earlier. But you can send out pretty easily like a campaign for a 5-question survey or six questions on a particular topic, just to do like a little pulse check on a particular risk. What kind of things would you be incorporating in there? And just to kind of prime the pump a little bit, I would always be incorporating something like, what is your hallucination risk? Some people are going to answer that in a lot of different ways. And I think the way that they substantiate that, if that's maybe a Likert scale, I would recommend kind of a box after it where someone can like describe how their hallucination risk has been reduced. That can be reduced by the tool that they're using. Some of these deep research tools, like whether it's Gemini or it's Perplexity, they'll have a works cited with links back to where these claims were made, so you can spot check those kinds of things. Other times people have a very sort of complex prompt or a complex gem that they built or a project that they built where, it can highlight, where it's, it can be instructed to not hallucinate if it doesn't have the answer to go ahead and call that out. So those are a couple of ways, but to kind of assess and pinpoint this hallucination risk. But how do we kind of get a sense of like, what is our AI exposure? How would you instruct someone to think through that from like a high level, or even just adding some questions to a bite-sized risk assessment?
I would start with, how are you going to use AI? And so, as I mentioned, I use it as an editorial assistant to help me edit. I use it as a research assistant to do research. You are spot on, Nick, and Karen as well, with the Karen, your comments about the lawyers who turned in the briefs that had AI that made up the cases. Everybody laughed, stupid lawyers. Except the point I took from it is it's a first draft. It may be right, it may be wrong, but it's up to you to check it to make sure it's right. I've gotten hallucinations. I've gotten hallucinations with citations. And I've looked at those citations and I'm like, I can't find any of these. So you have to be cognizant of that. And then from there, are you going to move to a truly analytical approach to moving from a question of what do I need to do in my business to market my product to what's going to be the ROI if I market my product? Because then you're making a business projection based on a calculation in AI, which you may not know how that calculation's made. So I would try to start with how are you going to use it and try to govern around that. Doesn't mean you can't use it for advanced analytics. I think that's absolutely critical for the use of AI. It's just that you need to operate with greater caution and care and put a second set of eyes on everything.
I think that's right. That's great advice. You know, there's this argument about the black boxedness, the black box nature of these AI models. But to your point, if you're using it as a research assistant or you're using it as a junior analyst to do something or a junior editor, you also can't get inside their brain. You don't know their biases as well, you know, in that case as well. And so to your point, Tom, if we can view output as a first draft, as a brainstorming partner, or as something to get started that we are actually going to process ourselves to, you know, before it sort of leaves the nest, so to speak. I think that can do a lot to get us comfortable with the output from it and also get us comfortable beginning to use it. Karen, what would you add? And then we'll wrap up. We're running a couple minutes long, so sue us, okay? Send us a lawsuit if you're...
I know. I know we're at the top of the hour. I have so many thoughts and ideas on this, but a lot of them have been generated by Tom's amazing book. And so I'm going to, you know, given that we're so short on time, I'm just going to defer to pretty much everything that Tom said and get the book, and people should read that book because it'll do the same for you.
Well, that's the story of my life. That's my formula for success as well. Just defer to Tom and get some knowledge from him. So, guys, thank you so much. Let's get one more emoji exploji for the one and only Tom Fox and the one and only Karen Moore. Hope you guys can join us next week. We got another great session. We'll be at the AI conference next week. So, you know, everything's moving. Everything's moving fast here. So, love you all. See you next week.